So we're here to talk about attendance. Mr. Staten actually put together a presentation, so we'll get to a little bit about that. I'm just going to talk to you guys about it from an employer standpoint. So how many of you guys have a job right now where you have time cards, some way of keeping track of time? So most of you are familiar with the whole idea of how it transitions from how we keep track of time from an employer standpoint and how it transitions to how it matters from a pay period. How many of you work for an employer that has an attendance policy? Okay, some of you do. How many of you have read the attendance policy in your student handbook, either at your high school or here at Tarkio Tech? Some of you, yeah. So how many of you got to have a conversation about attendance with somebody in authority at any time in your life? Okay, so all right, so some of us are already familiar with attendance and why it matters. A lot of parents can complain a lot about attendance policies in high school, but I actually like them because I know what it's like to, I don't particularly as an employer want to teach you how to work when you come to work for me, right? I want you to know how to work when you get here. And you guys have already shown that you care about knowing how to work and being a good employer because many of you have jobs and you're sitting here today, right? So you've already shown you have a little bit more aptitude for learning and wanting to be a good employee. So why do you think attendance matters? What does it matter in a healthcare setting? Anybody, you don't have to raise your hand here. Yeah, you don't want the patients waiting, right? What else? Yeah, you're answering to someone. I don't want the patients waiting. If you just did you're showing up for an 8 o'clock surgery and the nurse just doesn't feel like coming in that day, what did you do the 12 hours before your 8 a.m. surgery? Not eat, right? Or a colonoscopy. Anybody knows what that kind of like? Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of prep that goes up to a patient's put in the time. The insurance company says that they can have the surgery. Everybody's waiting, and then somebody doesn't show up to do their job. So if you're, how many of you have been in a situation where you counted on someone and they didn't show up to do their job? So what is that? Yeah. So what does that make you feel like when it comes to whether that's a teammate or it's someone you work with? What is your immediate reaction when that happens? Yeah, disappointed. Maybe you didn't get to do something you wanted to do. Now your schedule's all messed up. Maybe something else happens, and now you're missing something else that was important to you because someone else didn't come and kind of do their job. Now that is not to say that there aren't times when you can't physically do something or perform something, you're ill or whatever. But for the most part, most of us can get to work. Most of us can get to school. A lot of times when it comes to attendance, it becomes a mindset or a choice when we get to that point where we're having attendance issues. So one of the things I always want to point is when you begin to have an attendance issue, typically it doesn't just impact you. In healthcare, you impacted the patient, but you also impacted your teammates, and that's going to change how they feel about you over time. And over time, then you're going to start having some issues inside the workplace with how you guys get along and who you are. Now, all of you, how many of you are a part of a team, some kind of team, yep, athletically or otherwise, right? So same thing goes. Like you've had those kind of feelings of bitterness or anger or when somebody doesn't show up or doesn't do their part. So all of those things come into the workplace too. It's very similar. So some of the kind of logistics of attendance and workplace, most employers have an attendance policy just like your school does. And we have at Community Hospital Fairfax, just to explain, and I think this will be very similar anywhere else where you go into work, we have what we call planned absences and unplanned absences. So planned absences, hey, I'm going on vacation with my family. I let my boss know. They were able to accommodate my job. Everything's great, you know. An unplanned absence is my kid is sick and I got to stay home with them. So our unplanned absence policy is we have 7 unplanned absences before we start to have conversations. And then it's what we call progressive corrective action. Does anybody know what do you think progressive corrective action means? Yep, right. So you're going to progress down towards what could be a termination. So an attendance issue in healthcare is if you have a continued ongoing attendance issue, you are going to head toward your job being terminated. And we talked a little bit why attendance in healthcare is so important. Now, it's not the only place it's important. Any job that you do, attendance is important. but if it's important enough to your employer, they're going to have an attendance policy. And you should read that right when you onboard to your new position. You'll understand really quickly. We also have benefits at Community Hospital Fairfax, which you guys would need to read about too when you're first employer. You might have what you call paid time off. You might have a sick time policy. You probably have a tardiness policy, how many times you can be late before you start on that progressive corrective action. So make sure you're reading all of that before you come to work. But most of all, just show up. I think 95% of life in being successful is just being in the room where it happens, is showing up and being the people. You will get opportunities. You will get noticed. You will get appreciated, not just by your boss, by your teammates, by showing up and working hard. So that's kind of a general overview, and I'm going to do I do this, Johnny? Oh yeah, push forward and see if there's anything I didn't cover. Okay, so same thing Mark wanted to talk about is just the different ways of timekeeping. So at the hospital, we actually have an app on our phone for clocking in. There are two different kinds of employees that you might be someday. You might be what's called exempt or non-exempt. Okay, does anybody know what the difference is between exempt or non-exempt? Okay. No, it's not. That's a good guess, though. So if you're an exempt employee, that means your pay status means that you do not clock in and clock out. You're getting paid a certain amount for the job that you're required to do. So in my case, I have a job I'm required to do. I have a job description. It's 5 pages of all the things that I committed to do for Community Hospital Fairfax, and I get paid to do those items in that job. Now, we have other individuals who, let's take a nurse on the floor, they're going to be what we call a non-exempt employee. That means that they're going to be paid for to do a certain job during certain hours, and those individuals are going to clock in and clock out. Okay, so when we talk about a physical time clock, digital, mobile apps, paper timesheets, there's a lot of ways that, honesty in your time reporting is super important. In all likelihood, your workplace is going to have some protections built in so that you couldn't be dishonest, not that I think any of you will, but if you work long enough, you're going to meet somebody who is dishonest in how they report their time. At Community Hospital in Fairfax, we have an app on our phones if you're a non-exempt employee. It's actually got geofence on it, so it will not let you clock in from home. If you're not on the premises, if you're not within so many feet of Community Hospital Fairfax, you can't clock in, but you can. That's how it works, and it's really nice because they can clock in anywhere, anytime. Used to be that you maybe had to punch a time clock or you had to report your time to your boss. I think and that happens in a lot of places, and that's fine. That's probably how a lot of you are doing it. Maybe do you guys have a time card that you write in and write out? How are you doing it in the job you have now? Yeah, any of you? Yeah. Yeah, that's similar. That works. A lot of people do it on their computer, on their phone, whatever works. It's nice to do on your phone. A lot of times when you walk into, let's say you're an emergency nurse and you walked into the ER, sometimes you got to go straight to work. So it's nice to clock in right when you hit the parking lot, so you're not losing time when you get in and you maybe go straight to work and get your hands in on something kind of emergency. So in any of these ways that you guys are reporting, or you are reporting your attendance, the most important thing is to be honest. In the hospital where we work, our app also has schedules, so you can see when you're supposed to work and when you're supposed to be there. And I'm sure you guys all in the work that you have schedules, you have times when you've made a commitment to being there. One of the things I tell my kids, and I tell individuals coming into the workforce, that a job is like a contract. What do you think I mean by that? A job is like a contract. Even though you don't sign one necessarily to do the job, what do you think I mean by a job is like a contract? Right, and in return, the employer is doing what? Paying you. Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you think about that when you look at your schedule, when you look at that time clock, that you said, I can do that job. You came in, you said, I can do that job well, and I'm going to show up for the schedule you gave me, and I'm going to do it. And so that's what you mean. Now, I think social media, I'm going to get on a little tangent. Social media I had somebody call in, we have 177 employees, so you don't know this person. They don't work at the hospital site, but somebody called in a few months back with a mental health day. Is that attendance issue? Okay, so anyway, that's really interesting. I think social media will tell you, don't go to school today. And believe me, there's nothing more important than mental health. I don't mean that. But I do think when there comes to attendance, that sometimes social media is leading you to believe that how your attendance policy is going to be amended to how you feel that day. It is not. At Community Hospital Fairfax, you get 7 unplanned absences. So if you need to take a mental health day, by all means, take it. But do know that that's going to count toward your unplanned absences. That's not a PTO day. So when you're hearing me say, hey, I'm not telling you if you're having a bad day, that sometimes when I'm having a bad day, there's no place I should not be other than work and interacting with other people, right? I should just go home and shut my mouth, right? And sometimes those days happen. But do know that that's going to count against your unplanned absence. It's probably going to, but that's why it's really important to read those attendance policies. Do you want to click forward? I don't know if you want, I didn't watch the YouTubes. Do you think he intended? I don't know how long I have here. Is this an hour? Oh, heavens, we better watch the YouTube. So this is an example of Mr. Staten's time clock. So here they probably have formulas set up in an Excel spreadsheet, and so it calculates the time and then eventually the hours to be paid. So that's what he would turn in for payroll, probably every 2 weeks. I'm assuming most people are every 2 weeks. So this might be one example of how you might be required to do that. Or if a little bit bigger organization, you might have an app or something that you clock into from your break room or computer screen. So that's kind of what it looks like. Do you want to go to the next one? So we talked a little bit about this, attendance policy, the difference between excused and unexcused absence. That's kind of what I talked about when it was unplanned and planned. What do you have permission for from your boss? And a lot of times your employer is going to have a process for those planned absences. So don't just walk in and be like, I'm going on vacay next week, boss. Like, don't do that. You probably have a process. When you start at that new place, find out what it is, and so that you're doing your part to request those new jobs. Set alarms. So who here can't get up with their alarm? This is an interesting thing to me. Like I've raised, you guys know my kids. I have one that can get up with an alarm. Two, there could be a fire engine in the house and it's not going to happen. So what I learned over time is that you're either a person who can or you can't. You guys agree with that? Like you can either get up with an alarm or you can't. So those of you that have a little bit more alarm issues, you're going to have to develop some sort of process for getting up, right? So that might be an alarm across the room, an actual physical alarm, not your phone. That might be someone who calls you, or you may have to have some sort of backup plan, get one. Because your boss someday will not care that you cannot wake up to an alarm. They're going to say, Danny, you're an adult now. Get up, So just, you're going to need some other kind of process to make sure you're up and going in the morning. So don't forget that. E is confirm all appointments. Will you flip to the next one? So this is an example of a calendar. How many of you guys use a calendar now, whether it's paper or your phone? Some of you do, some of you don't. Yeah. Off and on. And you may not right now, your schedule's not so complex that you really need to keep a calendar. Some point in your future you will, especially when you get to whatever you want to do post high school. You'll want to have some sort of a calendar system. Some people carry a planner, use their phone, use your computer, whatever it is. But this is a great place to keep your work schedule. And if your company uses an app, a lot of times your work schedule and your calendar, you can transport your work schedule into your calendar. Even at the school, if right now, you can grab that school calendar and import it into your personal calendar. So you can keep track of all those things where you need to be and when you need to be. My calendar looks similar to this. Everything is color-coded to whether it's something that I need to be at from my personal life or my professional life. If it's really important, if I don't want to forget it, I use the same thing. In this calendar, it looks similar to this. It's all color-coded. And it looks like if you look, do you see how she's imported a calendar here? Because she has all the Royals games on there. So she's obviously gone somewhere and imported that calendar, but you could do the same thing if you wanted to. So I think when I encourage new people that come into the workplace that have a little bit of trouble maybe don't have much experience in getting themselves organized and meeting deadlines, the first thing I will counsel them to do is develop a system that works for them. So you need to know if you're a disorganized person. Like, just know now. If you don't get up with your alarm, if keeping track of tasks, you probably bring all sorts of awesome things to the workplace. Creativity, humor, maybe you're just the best time, you're fun, but maybe your strength is not deadlines, your strength is not organization, meeting those kind of things. You need to know that now. And you're going to have to develop some sort of system to keep yourself organized. Because in the workplace, there are a certain level of expectations. You just can't be fun all the time. Like, you do have to meet deadlines, you need to meet commitments, you need to show up on time. So you need to figure out what it is that's going to work for you to get you to a point where you can be successful. One of the things I ask in interviews, not so much if I'm hiring like a director or maybe a higher level nurse, but if I'm working with someone who's new to the workplace, I will always ask, how's your attendance been in your previous place of employment? And then I will call your boss. Whether you tell me I can or not, I'm going to call your previous employer and say, how did they show up? So even if you're developing, those of you that are still in high school, if you're developing the reputation of not showing up now and you want to work locally, your reputation will follow you. So if you are not in the habit of showing up to school, to work, to practice, to weightlifting, like, probably the employer down the road already knows that. So you need to change those habits now and be the kind of person that shows up. Because then, if you're someone like me that's been hiring this community for a really long time, I'm starting to hire people that went to high school with my kids. I mean, I know, I can't help but know. So these are you want to start your reputation for now, for being the type of person that shows up. Now, you aren't going to be a perfect employee right off the bat. Everything at work is not going to go great, but what you can do is show up and be on time and be somebody that they can count on. So, we can go to the next one. You want to hit on that Indeed video? We talked through all about this, your process, your phone numbers, advance notice. Again, just being honest and practicing integrity with your attendance. And if the company policy is you have attendance rules, part of your obligation is to practice integrity, not just with how you clock in and when you're there, but practice integrity within those policies. Because again, remember when I talked about employment as a contract, you said you'd follow those policies when you walked in the door and took that job. You said you'd do that. So be the kind of person that lives up to those. Do you want to click forward? What's next? You can cover this, Johnny.
All right. Yeah, because we value attendance, and attendance seems to be the biggest issue. Like Ann said earlier, showing up is 90%, 95% of the job. Then we want every student who has 100% attendance at the end of the month to receive a possible reward. Your name will be put into a drawing, and the winner, the person drawn out, will get a $20 gift card from various businesses in the area. Now, this means no excused or unexcused absences. It means being there every day for the award. So each month, you'll start over with a clean slate, and if you've been there 100% of the time, you will have a chance to win that. I shared with you last week about the policy up at one of our welding companies where if you're there every day of the week, your $26 an hour becomes $27 an hour that week. And over the course of a full year, that's about $2,000 more that you're going to get that you weren't planning on. So attendance is very, very important.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I'll also mention something else. Ann mentioned their policies at the hospital where they have designated days off. At Tarkio Tech, we have what's called a paid time off policy. So that means that as you work, you collect hours for time off. Whatever your reason is for time off, you use that PTO. The reason that that's important is because sometimes when you need to take time off, you need to weigh that against other possible problems. So when you have that student that says, I'm just going to take a personal day, or not that student, when you have that employee that says, I'm going to take a mental health day, they need to understand that that's one day you're going to lose out of that PTO. So it's like, maybe I don't need that as bad as I need a vacation, because you use that paid time off for vacation, for illness, for death in the family, for just mental health days. So So you always want to balance those out and be careful and use that, spend that like you spend your money, hopefully, very carefully and with a plan and a purpose. So
Mhm.
a little bit different when it's not specified for particular things.
Yeah. So the way PTO works at the hospital is you accrue the longer you've been there, so you get more. So you accrue. Does everybody know what accrue means? So every hour I work, a percentage of that hour is going into a bank, and I get that time off paid. So I accrue so much for the first 5 years, and so much for the next 5 years, and after 10 years, which I've been there 17, I accrue a day off for every 2 weeks that I work. So if you think about that, that's almost a month a year that I don't have to work that I get paid for. But if I'm not at work, I'm not accruing, right? So if you get some that's another policy you want to look at, because you're weighing two jobs when you get out of work. Look at their paid time off policy, because if you like to travel, you like time off, or you're a Chiefs fan and you want the Monday off after the game, you want to look at that policy, because again, every 2 weeks I work, that's a day off paid. So I at some point, if you can get your work done, you don't ever have to work a full 2 weeks. Now I can get my work done sometimes. So usually the way our family works, we'll take that in a big chunk of time. But it is available and it's a benefit to you. But it's only a benefit if you have good attendance. You're never going to get to that 5-year mark, that 10-year mark, if you're someone who just doesn't show up to work. I'm going to click, I don't remember what's next on this. Oh, yeah. Any questions? I think this is pretty straightforward. And I think everybody can pretty much agree that attendance is important when you're sitting in a classroom. I think it's I didn't sleep good the night before. I had a fight with my girlfriend. I, wrecked my car. There's always going to be things that happen in your lives that are going to impact your work life. And I think there's always going to be periods of our life when we're living a little bit of chaos. Whether something happens in our personal lives, maybe someone important to us has an illness or something they're trying to manage. There's always going to be those kind of things that happen, and you are going to need time off from work sometimes. And the best thing you can do is create that reputation of being reliable and being someone that can be counted on. So when you need that time off, your employer is happy to give it to you. We have people in our organization that we are happy to help them be. There are times when it's much more important to be a mother, to be a wife, to be a grandma than it is to be a community hospital and Fairfax employee. And we have people where we can just absolutely say, hey, get out of here, go do what you need to do. We're going to cover your work. We're going to take care of you. But those employees usually earn that. You earn that over time with your reputation and your commitment to others. So, anybody have any questions? You guys are a great audience. Thanks for listening. And if there's ever any of us at the hospital, as you guys start to get into your career, you guys know where to find me. If you ever want anybody to look over policies or resumes or recommendations or anything, I've been doing this for a long time. I'm always happy to help you. So if you just need hey, I need a second pair of eyes on this, I want to make sure this is a good fit for me. Because you can get into some employee situations where attendance policies are almost so hard that nobody could live up to them. So make sure you're getting some advice about that from your folks here at Tarkio Tech or any one of us here in the community. All right.
All right, the assignment for this lesson is two-part. Number one is what's called a learning styles inventory. Some of you may have taken this before, some of you may not have, but we want everyone to do that. It's always good to know how you learn best, because sometimes you have an option of what kind of learning environment you put yourself into. And if you put yourself into a learning environment that does not match your learning style, it is really a problem. In fact, a lot of you are here because you learn better when you can actually do the task, when you can work on it. A traditional 4-year college is what's called a verbal linguistic learning style, thanks, Ann, where you listen, you read, and that's how you learn. If you are a hands-on person, what we call a kinesthetic learning style, and you put yourself in that verbal linguistic style, you're going to struggle and you're going to be unhappy. vice versa, if you are a hands-on or kinesthetic learner and you are ready to read about it and listen to somebody tell you, and they hand you a tool and say, do this, you go, I don't understand. I can't do that. So take this survey. That's what you're supposed to do. Find out what your learning style is. It's very interesting when you start to look at the interpretation of that. Also, then the other part is go to our Tarchiotech webpage about the Student Code of Conduct, and it's got the address there. Then answer the questions that are on the other link. Share this all with Mark. The deadline for that is on Sunday, September 21st at 11:59, and I have the other sheet. I think that's what pops up when you do that other link there. But basically, the exit ticket for this lesson is, have you read the TTI Code of Conduct? Yes or no? And then what is one item about attendance you learned after reading about the Code of Conduct? And then after today's lesson on attendance, what's one area that you want to work on? This is your opportunity to do that. This is your practice field, so to speak. You know, I mentioned last week, if you remember, or 2 weeks ago as a counselor, the only question I was ever asked on referral forms, the only one question that is on every referral form, I mean, I get other questions, but the only one of them is on every referral form. What was their attendance? Now, they wouldn't ask that question if that wasn't very, very important. We get asked that question about you all. So when we're talking with employers, you know, when they come in, like on our hiring day at the end of the program, you'll talk with them. Some of them will be very impressed with you. And before they leave, they'll come in and they'll ask us, you know, well, how was their attendance? Why do they do that? Because that's important. If you're not there, you can't perform. So, any questions about the assignment?